The spoon never reaches the tea. It clinks once and hangs in Lena's hand as Farid says the words, like a verdict. Choose your husband or your child. The room seems to lean, the ceiling fan dragging the air into slow circles, while Armand's jaw locks and Sadaf folds her napkin. The way she folds every argument into something polite and lethal. You created this distance. Sadaf murmurs. We are only naming it. Lena swallows heat that tastes like iron, feeling Noor's watercolor drawings in the next room pressing against her back like witnesses. Armand says quietly, no one owns a child, and Farid's smile thins to a blade. The city outside crackles with horn and dust. Inside, time stands with its hands behind its back. Lena answers nothing, because any word might shatter into edges. Somewhere a kettle hisses over, and she hears in it the sound of doors closing, the warning that an ultimatum is not a request, but a fuse already lit. Lena walks the hallway like a thief in her own home, counting breaths to 5, because Noor's doctor said calm lives in numbers. Noor sleeps on her side, tiny hand cradling a paper boat she begged to keep from school. Armand's shadow joins hers in the doorway, his voice a thread. We hold together, he says, and she wants to believe that threads can be steel. Behind them, the clatter of plates recedes, a formal retreat. They won't stop, Lena whispers, the words tasting like rain, and Armand answers. Then we won't either. She kneels, listening to Noor's soft wheeze, that faint whistle that started last winter and never fully left, and she understands that choices are not doors but weather. And tonight, the storm has elected them without consent. Morning bleeds in with the ache of too little sleep, and the phone buzzes with a message from Sadaf that reads like a blessing, but sounds like a wall. Come for lunch, talk calmly, bring Noor. The quiet is a held-in cough. Armand spreads documents across the table, notes from his current investigation into a charity that launders goodwill into power. Farid's name lives in a footnote like a snake behind a curtain. You think they'll use Noor to block you, Lena says, and Armand doesn't answer because silence is the closest to yes he can give without breaking something. The kettle sings again. Lena chooses her clothes like armor and kisses Noor's forehead, making a promise with no words, only warmth. Outside, the rain has washed the dust into mirror puddles that dare everyone to look. At her parents' apartment, the view is all harbor and cranes, like steel giraffes, and Sadaf's welcome smells of saffron and gentle strategy. Noor runs fingers along the embroidered cushions while Farid performs grandfatherly ease, lifting her onto his knee and telling a story about ships that never cry in storms. Lena watches the performance and recognizes the stage. We can share, Beta, Sadaf says, eyes on Noor, if Armand steps back from his dangerous work. Armand smiles without teeth. Storms cry when the captains cheat, he says lightly, and Farid's gaze hardens a degree. Noor coughs, a small brittle thing that snaps the room. Lena's palm goes to her back, and in that second she knows the time for soft edges ended last night. The conversation spirals into velvet threats. Sadaf speaks of stability, schools, reputations. Farid mentions donors and safety, and the way Armand's reporting invites enemies to visit the doorstep. Lena says at last, no one is leaving anyone, and the room tilts, the harbor flickering in glass like a lie. Noor coughs again, longer, chest clicking. Armand's face drains. Enough, he says, standing, and Farid rises too, mirroring. A dance they did not rehearse but know by blood. The air thins until every breath is decision. Then Noor wheezes, a small, soft wheeze that turns knife-sharp, and Lena hears alarms without hearing any, the kind that live in a mother's bones. Hospital, she says. No one argues. The storm chooses its hour. They move. Rain follows them into triage, shaking loose from umbrellas and sleeves, as if the weather is trying to enter Noor's lungs too. Lena signs forms with a hand she cannot feel while Armand lifts Noor onto a gurney, whispering sea stories. He knows by heart because the sound steadies more than the sense. A nurse calls for oxygen. The mask is a small fogging shield. Dr. Rihanna appears like a scalpel in human shape. Eyes swift, voice unblinking. She listens, counts, presses, orders an echo, and labs. She's compensating, she says, but not forever. Lena nods because nodding is the only motion that does not break her. Farid and Sadaf arrive with umbrellas that look like banners, concern, trimmed, and ready for display. If danger lives here, she should be with us, Sadaf says, and Rehana's gaze flicks up, uninterested in politics, married to pulse and saturation. The monitors beep like metronomes conducting fear into rhythm. The corridor smells of antiseptic and old arguments. While Noor is wheeled to imaging, Sadaf produces a folder as if it were a handkerchief, soft voice, wrapping barbed wire. Temporary guardianship for medical decisions while you're overwhelmed, she says. The word temporary, drifting like perfume that never fades. Farid's fingers rest on the page, where a signature already sits, eerily familiar. Lena feels the room tilt. I didn't sign that, she says, and the hallway grows smaller. Armand steps between the folder and air. A nurse calls for consent at radiology. The moment tries to split them like wet wood. Lena hears her own heartbeat thudding in her ears and chooses the doctor's door over the family's net. In her pocket, the phone buzzes with Aisha's message. Check your email now. She opens it to a scanned form bearing her name, letter forms stolen and paraded, and the subject line from an unknown sender that reads, only caring grandparents would act this fast. By the vending machines, Armand scrolls through a sudden hail of messages, as if the phones have learned to gossip. A photo blooms on every screen. Armand on a dim street, leaning close to a woman whose face is turned from the camera, his hand halfway to passing a flash drive. The caption does not accuse. It insinuates the worst kind of efficient cruelty. Lena knows the source at a glance, a whistleblower whose life is a tinderbox. Truth filmed sideways can look like betrayal. Farid arrives beside them with a sigh calibrated to sound fatherly. Courts dislike danger, he offers. Not quite to Armand. Sadaf's hand alights on Lena's arm like a dove that bites. Armand meets Lena's eyes without flinching. This is the charity case, he says. Voice low. They're panicking. In the echo of his words, Lena hears the trap snapping shut. A forged consent to seize Noor's choices. A smear to stain a father's hands. Aisha brings clarity. The way storm. Wind clears smoke. The timestamp's wrong, she says, flipping to metadata. And the clinic letter was drafted yesterday before Noor coughed. She threads through screens and receipts like a practiced diver. Kamal arrives, summoned by a message he answers at speed, sharp suit softening only around the eyes. He studies the guardianship form, frowns at the looping signature. Common tracing pattern, he murmurs. Pressure changes where a wrist would lift, but here it doesn't. Whoever did this had a clean sample. Lena knows where clean samples live. School forms, birthday cards framed on a wall at her parents' home. The thought lands like a stone. We seek an immediate injunction, Kamal says, calm as a surgeon. And you, Armand. Cease every contact with the charity except through me. The hallway quiets as if the building has chosen a side. Lena exhales and tastes iron and rain, and the unavoidable word, fight. Alarms are small at first, a higher beep among beeps, then the quickened rhythm of running feet. Lena and Armand reach the ward as nurses pivot the bed, and Rehana's voice threads commands into order. Noor's chest rises, stutters, rises again. She needs observation and PICU, Rehana says, eyes on the monitors. Behind them, Farid's phone speaks in a lawyer's voice through a speaker. Language about emergency custody and the best interests of a child rolling like clean marble toward a door. Kamal steps into frame with a stamped notice as if conjured. A late-hour judge grants a temporary freeze on guardianship, changes pending hearing. Sadaf's smile is thin porcelain. "You delay what must be," she says. Lena leans close to Noor, smelling the warm plastic of the mask, and whispers a promise shaped like a vow and a warning. The storm has chosen its field. She will play on it until the thunder is out of breath. Night folds itself into the hospital like a second blanket. Thin and rare drafts sneak through. Armand sits with the glow of the laptop casting long shadows over his knuckles, spreadsheets lining up like soldiers, waiting for inspection. Lena stands by the PICU glass, forehead barely touching, watching Noor's chest rise with the soft insistence of a tide that will not be commanded. Aisha's whisper lands between them, a report of donations that loop from Farid's charity to shell vendors that share a phone number with a private security firm. It braids power into mercy, Armand says, not looking up, because looking might spill the anger he is holding steady. Kamal calls with a plan that sounds like architecture. Freeze accounts, subpoena emails, anchor everything to timestamps that do not blink. Lena closes her eyes and sees forms, signatures, and the sly humility of false concern. Somewhere a machine chirps approval. Somewhere else, thunder rehearses its next entrance. Morning arrives bright and unforgiving, the kind that shows every fingerprint on a lie. Kamal lays out a timeline on a legal pad, each arrow a path from donation to influence, to the small throne of a patriarch who mistakes obedience for love. Aisha slides her phone across to Lena, a screen full of messages where Sadaf's tone curdles from honey to vinegar in 3 sentences, the last ending with a threat wrapped as a proverb. Lena feels the old training to placate rise and then break like glass under a heel. They move the guardianship hearing up. Kamal says, the words hard and necessary. Armand's eyes lift from the laptop. We move faster. Lena's voice surprises her, steady and low. We move cleaner. She records a message to herself, a simple account of the ultimatum and the forged form in case stories need spine later. Outside, the sky scrubs itself blue, as if today could be washed of what came before. Dr. Rehana gathers them at the bedside and speaks like someone who refuses to dramatize what is already dramatic. The tests map a weakness that has waited in Noor's chest, a valve that flutters when it should clasp. We watch closely, she says, and we plan for what might be needed if watching isn't enough. The words fold a new fear into the deck. Farid arrives with a polished sorrow that shines under the ward lights. Sadaf, with a tiffin whose scent courts forgiveness. You are overwhelmed, Sadaf murmurs. Let us sign what steadies the ship. Lena answers with nothing but the quiet placement of her hand over Noor's. Armand steps into the space where pressure tries to sit. Any document touches our lawyer first, he says, tone even as a ruler. Rehana's gaze flicks between them and lands back on the child, the only sovereign in the room. Machines breathe, their faithful counting, uninterested in theater. Back in the consultation room, Aisha unspools a discovery like silk from a hidden pocket. A clinic record from months ago shows a mild wheeze note overwritten, a second scan ghosting beneath the first in grayscale. Duplicate layer artifacts, she says, tapping the screen. Someone replaced an original with a softened version. Kamal's mouth tightens. He recognizes a pattern of narrative laundering. Armand traces the edit's metadata to a user account registered to a health NGO that partners with Farid's charity. The same initials, repeating like a watermark. Lena feels anger rearrange her, not as fire, but as a tool sharpened on stone. We don't just defend, she says, eyes clear. We show the making of the lie. Kamal nods, already drafting motions that sound like the scraping of chairs before decisive action. Outside the window, a kite wavers against hard blue, refusing to be dragged by any string but wind. As evening drips down the walls, the ward dims to a chapel of machines and murmurs. Lena sits alone beside Noor, telling a story about a paper boat that learned to ride storms by listening to the rain. The words steady her more than the child. Perhaps stories are rafts we build for ourselves first. Through the glass, she spots Farid in the corridor, taking a call. His face turned away, but his shoulders squared in the old commander's stance. Sadaf joins him, gloved in tenderness that now reads like armor. Lena remembers the ultimatum and feels something click into place. A small interior switch turning from plea to promise. Arman returns with coffee and a quiet that carries resolve. Tomorrow, he says, we show them the thread. Lena nods, presses her palm to Noor's small heartbeat, and answers without sound. Tomorrow we pull until the tapestry gives up its shape and reveals the knots. Morning stretches thin over the ward, a pale ribbon between dread and decision. Kamal draws boxes on a legal pad and numbers them like steps across a river, each labeled with a piece of proof that can carry weight without cracking. Aisha's voice is quick and bright as she lists access logs from the clinic server, a user trail that leads back to the partner NGO like muddy footprints. Arman outlines the charity flowchart, showing how donations loop into a security firm whose invoices kiss Farid's ledger. Lena listens, then threads her own line through the map. I will ask for their blessing, she says, tasting the word that has so often been used to fold her choices. I will take it with my phone in my scarf. Kamal does not flinch. Do not prompt. Let them name their mercy, Doctor. Rihanna steps in with a measured update. Noor is stable, but stability is not a promise. The plan hardens in their hands like cooled glass. Lena enters her parents' apartment carrying sweetness in her voice and a new iron under it. Sadaf greets her with soft eyes and sandalwood, a silver tray of oil and dates arranged like a small ceremony. Let me bless you, Beta, Sadaf murmurs, fingertips cool at Lena's hairline. The words braided with old lullabies and recent ultimatums. Farid stands by the window, harbor glittering behind him, a figure in a frame he believes he painted. Lena breathes with the rhythm of the prayer and lets silence become invitation. Sadaf fills it. We had to steady the ship, she confides, almost tender. Your signature was already on file from Noor's school, so the form only needed guidance, Farid adds without turning. The clinic cooperates with those who keep it funded. Judges prefer order. Lena nods as if accepting balm while her scarf pin holds her phone in its concealed watch. The blessing pools like light over glass, showing everything beneath. By the docks, the air tastes of salt and solvent, and Arman meets a man whose nerves twitch like fishing lines in wind. The source produces photocopies with a trembling pride. Invoices from the security firm stamped with a project code that matches Farid's charity events. A second sheet shows a media retainer paid the day before the smear photo appeared. The memo line reading community outreach. Aisha's voice arrives in Arman's ear through a bud, triangulating phone pings that place the NGO liaison near the clinic server. The hour the record changed. Chain is clean, she says. Follow it. Arman photographs every page with careful hands, then looks past the warehouses to the water where cranes lift containers, like truths pried from the deep. He thinks of Noor's breath and the little boat by her pillow and lets the anger sharpen into precision. The storm wants noise. He will bring weight. Back at the hospital, the consultation room becomes a courtroom in rehearsal. Kamal arranges exhibits in a neat procession. Audio file at the front, like a herald, followed by access logs, invoices, and the filtered clinic PDF with its ghost layer. Aisha drafts captions that translate the data into sight for a judge who will not have time to linger. Arman writes a statement no longer than a heartbeat, naming the smear and the motive without heat. Lena sits with headphones and listens to her mother's blessing again, this time hearing the lacework of confession woven between endearments. She feels no triumph, only clarity, a clean edge where fog used to be. Dr. Rihanna signs a brief affidavit about the record discrepancy without flinching. Truth helps medicine, she says simply. Outside, the evening gathers itself, blue deepening to indigo, and the harbor lights write their silent code on the water. The turn is not loud. It is exact. Lena asks Sadaf to visit the hospital prayer room before the night shift changes, a request wrapped in the fabric of old obedience. Sadaf comes in quiet sandals, eyes bright with relief. She mistakes for victory. The room is small, carpet soft, a single candle flickering beside a basin. "Bless Noor," Lena whispers and kneels, placing her phone on the prayer book as if it were nothing at all. Words float like feathers as Sadaf begins, then sink with weight. "I did what mothers do," she says, stroking Lena's hair. "I protected the child from a man who invites danger." Her voice softens, confessional and certain. "We guided the clinic. We hurried the hearing. We blurred his reputation so the judge would see sense." Outside in the hall, Kamal waits with headphones and a quiet fury. A message pings on Sadaf's phone. Fareed's text bragging that the accounts will hold through morning. Lena closes the prayer book. The turn clicks like a lock opening from the inside. The courtroom smells of varnish and dusted pride, a place where voices are trained to wear suits. Kamal arranges the exhibits like chess pieces, while Armand sits with his hands folded so tightly the knuckles pale. And Lena keeps her breathing on a metronome she learned by Nora's bed. Fareed arrives with a confident incline of the chin, Sadaf with palms pressed as if in prayer for decorum. The judge scans the docket with eyes that skip and land, a bird choosing which branch will hold. Fareed's counsel opens with safety and propriety, the words heavy with borrowed virtue. Then Kamal rises, a quiet blade. He plays the recording of a blessing-turned blueprint, Sadaf's voice laying out forms and hearings and careful smears. The room's air thins. Fareed reaches for stillness, but his counsel missteps into a denial that contradicts the audio by a single fatal line. The judge's pen stops moving. Somewhere outside, sirens climb a stair of sound toward the hospital. As the recording fades, the courtroom lights flicker once, twice, like a heartbeat skipping. Phones vibrate in pockets and handbags. An alert blooms across screens announcing a grid failure in several districts. Hospital backups engaged. Lena's chest squeezes around Noor's name before she can speak it. Armin is already on his feet, apology in his eyes, urgency in his bones. The judge grants a brief recess without blinking, gaze pinned to the exhibits as if the power outage dared her attention to wander. In the corridor, Aisha meets them at a run, thrusting a power bank and a message. PQ on generator, stable for now. Kamal stands between panic and purpose. "We finish the cut while the steel is hot," he says, voice low. "Then we run." Lena nods, the word finish tasting like resolve. They re-enter the courtroom as the fluorescents hum back to life, and the truth waits on a screen that will not excuse itself for darkness. Inside again, Kamal threads the exhibits like beads on a single line. Forged consent with its pressureless loops, clinic logs that breathe, the liaison's initials, invoices kissing Fareed's ledger. The media retainer stamped the eve of rumor. He ends by tapping the phone that holds Sadaf's blessing confession. The sound, a tiny gavel. Fareed's counsel objects on foundation. Kamal lays the chain with unhurried hands, witness to witness, timestamp to timestamp, each link a rung upward. Lena feels something unfamiliar unfurl in her chest, not triumph but alignment, like bones returning to socket. Sadaf watches the room as if rehearsing gracious acceptance of a later apology that will not come. Then the judge speaks, voice as level as a spirit level. Emergency guardianship is frozen. Medical decisions belong to the parents. The court will examine allegations of fraud. The words land with the clean weight of rainfall finding thirsty earth. Lena's phone buzzes again. The hospital needs them now. The hospital is a ship in stormlight when they arrive. Generator hum, a deep animal under the floors. Piku swims in blue dimness. Monitors glow like constellations that refuse to fail. Dr. Rahana moves with calm precision, explaining that Noor's valve is misbehaving more boldly under the stress, that they are prepping for an intervention if watching turns to acting. Lena brushes Noor's hair with trembling fingers and tells her the paper boat is learning a new wave. Arman stands at the window, fist against glass, absorbing the rhythm of machines as if they could borrow his steadiness. Farid and Sadaf appear at the threshold with faces arranged for tragedy, but Kamal's injunction sits on the bed table like a guardian no one can overrule. A moment later, the lights dip and surge. The generator coughs and steadies. Rihanna nods to her team, hands already in motion. "We're going now," she says, and the room tightens into purpose. They wheel Noor toward the procedure suite. The corridor, a tunnel of soft alarms and gleaming floor. Lena walks beside the bed, whispering a tale about a harbor light that never slept. Arman matches the gurney's pace, offering his heartbeat as metronome. Aisha waits near double doors with a small smile that is really a held breath, and Kamal stands watch like a lamppost that knows its duty. Farid's phone vibrates with messages he refuses to read. Sadaf swallows hard, eyes finding no purchase on anyone's forgiveness. The outage hiccups once more, the lights dimming to the edge of fear, then blazing back. In that flare, Arman lifts his phone and shows a final exhibit on the screen to Farid. The security firm's director, newly flipped, a sworn statement naming the patron who ordered the smear. Fard looks smaller than his suits. Rihanna squeezes Lena's shoulder. "We mend what is meant to hold," she says, and disappears beyond the doors. The hinge turns. The storm bows. The waiting room has the hush of a chapel that lost its choir. Only the generator's bassline keeps time while Lena counts each minute twice. Aisha's phone trembles on the table, notifications streaming like meteor showers as the security director's affidavit vaults from Kamal's inbox to a newsroom, then ricochets across feeds, with Farid's name in the headline. Throat. Arman watches the cascade with a reporter's split vision, one eye on the public ledger of consequences, the other on the double doors that hold his daughter's breath. Kamal, methodical even in upheaval, files a supplemental motion in the same calm tone he used to order tea on quieter days. A message lands from the charity board, terse as a severed rope. Emergency meeting, effective immediate. Lena rereads the line where the director admits the smear was ordered to ensure judicial prudence, and a cold clarity washes her fatigue clean. Truth, once quiet, has found its microphone. The judge reconvenes by video to the hospital's conference room, a square of steady authority, floating amid the antiseptic whites. Kamal summarizes without adornment, layering the new affidavit atop the confession and the logs, until even the air seems to nod. Farid appears on a separate square, the Polish thinned to pale resolve. Sadaf sits beside him, chin high, insisting she acted as a mother, her words stitched with proverbs that wilt under timestamps. Lena asks to speak. Her voice does not tremble. She tells the court the short story of an ultimatum and a child who needs shelter more than theater. And she ends with the smallest sentence that feels like a door latch sliding home. No one chooses between their family. We choose our family. The judge's eyes soften, then sharpen. She announces findings that sound like scaffolding erected in storm. Guardianship affirmed to the parents. The forged form referred to prosecutors. Contact restricted until review. Somewhere, a monitor chimes acquiescence. By afternoon, the city learns new arithmetic. Every donor subtracts a pledge. Every board member tallies distance. Arman publishes a measured piece that reads like X-rays. No adjectives wasted, only bones and fractures set in plain sight. Aisha pushes the thread into the public square with careful captions, the kind that teach a crowd to distinguish signal from staged thunder. Farid exits the charity offices through a side door and finds reporters waiting where back doors used to end in silence. Saidaf's messages surface. Screenshots with her name threaded through instructions that once sounded like care and now taste like coercion. Lena stands at a window and watches the harbor cranes bow and lift, machines that do not mistake weight for worth. She thinks of Noor's tiny heart and the surgeon's hands and feels the symmetry of a lie collapsing under the same pressure it tried to apply to her. Reputation is loud. Consequence is heavier. When the doors finally open, Rahana's eyes carry the quiet a good captain brings back from rough water. Noor is stable. The valve responded. They will watch. But watching now feels like stewardship rather than siege. Lena's knees almost forget how to hold, then remember. She takes Noor's hand and tells the paper boat's story again, this time letting the storm end with sunlight that does not apologize for arriving late. Arman, unsteady only in the blink he gives the ceiling, presses his forehead to Noor's small knuckles. In the corridor, cameras gather like weather, but Lena steps out first and reclaims the narrative without theatrics. She thanks the medical team by name, refuses to salt the wound of family in public, and says a line that turns like a key in many doors. Care is not control. The clip will travel farther than any smear. In the ward behind her, machines hum a lullaby written in green lines and patience. The court's written order arrives like rain finally deciding to fall where it is owed. Guardianship affirmed. Forged documents to the prosecutor. A temporary protective order setting space around Lena, Arman, and Noor, wide enough for breath. Farid tries the old path of apology shaped like explanation, but the words echo in a hallway that no longer carries his voice. Sadaf sends a message that is almost a prayer and almost an alibi. Lena reads it and feels the ache of what could have been if love had not confused itself with conquest. She answers nothing. Instead, she posts a single photo of Noor's paper boat resting by a window full of clean sky. Aisha adds a caption that refuses venom and lifts clarity. Arman closes his laptop with care as if putting a lid on a storm jar. Kamal exhales through a smile that finally lets him be human. In the stillness that follows, the future leans closer. Morning lays a gentler light across the ward as if the building itself wants to change the subject. Lena wakes in the chair with a stiff neck and a clear head. Noor's breath a quiet metronome that sets the tempo of belief. Arman returns from the vending machine with 2 teas and a look that says he left his fear somewhere in the night and did not bother to collect it. Aisha slips in with the clean rustle of fresh printouts, the charity board's public statement naming resignations in a column that reads like an unmasking. Kamal follows with a small smile and a larger envelope. Confirmations that prosecutors have opened files where forged lines once pretended at kindness. Dr. Rehana appears unhurried as always and speaks of recovery, the way a cartographer speaks of roads, clear and conditional, honest and hopeful. Lena listens, feels the old walls inside her check their foundations, and decides not to rebuild them. The day has the texture of earned air. In a side conference room, Farid stands without his stage, shoulders uneven, the varnish finally showing the grain beneath. Sadaf sits beside him with her purse clenched, like a life ring that does not float. They ask to speak, and Lena allows it, because refusing would give the moment more power than it deserves. Apologies arrive coated in explanations that scrape the ear. The old claim that love required leverage, that storms demand a captain. Arman remains a wall that does not argue. Kamal observes with the quiet of an archivist. Aisha leans against the window and documents nothing, because not everything needs a crowd. Lena answers in a voice that has learned not to bow. She says they may visit when invited and only as grandparents, not as commanders, and that care without consent is not care at all. Silence holds. Farid looks smaller in the chair. Sadaf's eyes shine with a grief she earned. The boundary draws its bright, clean line and stays. Orgshu, mature, a stay. The charity holds its emergency meeting, and the city listens with a hunger that used to belong only to spectacle. Minutes later, the announcement lands like a tide against stone. Farid removed pending investigation. Funds frozen. An audit with teeth. Reporters cluster at the entrance. Microphones like sea anemones reaching for movement. Armand gives a statement that is short and antiseptic. Facts only, reasons tucked under plain words. Lena steps into the light and says there will be no victory parade, only accountability and rest, and that her daughter will not be a headline, only a child who needs stories and soup. Sadaf watches from a car window, reflections split by rain. The mirror she used to polish now showing a world that refuses her edits. Kamal briefs a prosecutor who prefers paper to drama. Aisha's posts gather the narrative and hold it still. A museum of receipts. Consequence stops asking permission. Evening returns them to the ward where the air smells again of soap and citrus and the relief of routine. Dr. Rahana outlines the plan in crisp paragraphs. Medication. Follow-up. The promise of play stitched back into the days. Noor wakes long enough to ask if the boat learned to whistle. Lena laughs and says the boat learned to listen, which is better. Armand tucks the blanket edge and finds his hands steady in a way that feels like a new biography. Aisha brings a small kite, printed with stars for the window, and Kamal signs the last of the forms with a flourish that finally admits relief. In the hall, Farid hesitates outside the glass, then lifts 2 fingers in a pale attempt at blessing. Lena meets his eyes and does not invite him in, yet she does not turn away. Mercy without surrender. The monitors hum their green hymn, and the generator is quiet, because the grid remembered its job. On the rooftop, the city lays out its restless glitter, and the harbor strokes the dark with a patient hand. Lena holds Noor against her hip and feels the small weight that calibrates all other measures. Armand sets the paper boat in a shallow puddle left by yesterday's rain and watches it catch the breeze and pivot without sinking. Aisha counts stars that do not stay still. Kamal tells a joke so dry it feels like land after long water. The phone in Lena's pocket is heavy with orders and headlines she does not open. She breathes, and in the exhale hears the echo of the ultimatum that tried to split her life. It returns to sender. Choices realign into a single road that has 3 names and 1 home. Below, a city argues with itself and goes on. Above, a kite the size of a hand tugs north. Lena whispers to Noor that families are built, not bargained. The wind agrees.